Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Canadian Football Central, CFL content for the fans, by the fans. And we are here with our mid-season report on the Montreal Alouettes. And we are wonderfully joined by the Alouettes Flightdeck with Cliff and Tim. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, getting right into things, how are you guys feeling about this season? I can't imagine very many complaints, obviously.
Well, there's not much to complain about, to tell you the truth. I mean, when the reigning, defending, undisputed Grey Cup champion Montreal Alouettes are basically 8-1. I mean, nearly undefeated, not quite undefeated, but nearly undefeated halfway through the season. What really do you have to complain about? It almost feels like, if nothing else, this team has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the win last November wasn't a fluke. They weren't lucky. This was a team that was clearly built to contend and built to win, and that's exactly what they've been doing. Save for that one loss on a short week against Toronto, which, again, we never promised perfection, but, I mean, other than that little blip on the radar, I mean, this team, despite all the injuries, despite any sort of adversity that comes their way, or that, they handle it, and they just go out and do their thing. And I mean, if you're an Alouettes fan, you've got to be thrilled beyond comparison to how this team is doing right now.
Absolutely. I mean, like, if we're just looking at them right now, first of all, I think with the Alouettes' performance, they were warranted of the Bruce Buffer reference at the start, in terms of just the way that they've performed, because it's been exactly that. I mean, they went on that big win streak last year. They go on and they win the Grey Cup. And, you know, there was definitely some people who were maybe had kind of that question of if this is like, I guess, putting this in hockey terms, is this like the 2019 St. Louis Blues where they get hot at the right time and they're able to carry that to a win? Is there something substantial? Going 8-1 to start the next season? Yeah, I'd say so. It's kind of hard to say that they're not, and they've been fantastic. Even with, you know, a key loss in a guy like Austin Mack, who actually just today, as of the recording of this video, was released from the Atlanta Falcons. So it's definitely been an interesting start here for Montreal, even with, because I'm not going to lie, I had some questions about the Alouettes when Cody Fajardo goes down, and kind of how I felt about Caleb Evans, and how, you know, I felt about Davis Alexander. And Davis Alexander goes out and does fantastic, and he's able to really carry on what Cody Fajardo had started, and keep this team, roughly where they're at. So that way, when Cody Fajardo comes back, it's not like they've endured a lot of losses and he's got to rebuild. That's just not the case in Montreal.
No, we've been very lucky to have, obviously, it was some lean years early on for the Alouettes, in the early 2010s and stuff like that. But especially after AC went down and he retired, we're just very happy to be able to have, a guy like Davis Alexander be able to step up and do what he's done, and just to get that chance, because Cliff and I have been watching him since he's come to the team 3 years ago, and we knew exactly what this kid could do.
Yeah. Now, one thing I kind of want to get into, if we're just maybe looking at the offense, is I guess this is for both of you guys, how would you kind of grade the overall performance of just kind of that front squad, whether that's the offensive line or the running backs, just that interior game? How has that been, in your opinion, as opposed to basically expectation for the Alouettes this season?
Compared to what it was like a year ago, when it seemed like Cody Fajardo was getting sacked multiple times per game.
Yeah.
And this year, barely any sacks on whether it's Fajardo, Evans, or Alexander. Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about night and day. I mean, this was a solid unit to start with, despite the numerous sacks being given up. Like, overall, this was a great offensive line. And it just feels like they just finally found that magic formula that lets them be, I won't say perfect, because yes, they do give up the occasional sack, but compared to where they were last year, I think they've improved dramatically. Yeah. And it's not like they changed a whole lot of pieces. I mean, it was just simply a matter of depth moves more than anything else. Jamar McGloster, who played the left tackle, or right tackle, sorry, he goes down to injury, but in comes Joshua Donovan, and he has just been absolutely magnificent. Unfortunately, the Alouettes decided that Landon Rice was getting a little long in the tooth, so they let him go. But other youngsters have stepped up and have been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you talk about the core of this being Justin Lawrence, Pierre-Olivier Lestage, and Philippe Gagnon, along with Nick Callender. Like, those are those are some solid dudes that have done exactly what you want them to do. Keep Cody upright or keep Davis upright and let them do their thing. Create the holes for Walter Fletcher, Joshua Antwi to run through and get those extra yards afterwards. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this offensive line has answered the call every single time, and there's been a lot more hits and misses when it comes to this group.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about the running backs too. Is that we're losing? We weren't really sure what to think of it when we lost William Stanback to free agency to BC. So, but being able to give Walter Fletcher his due, finally get him a shot to be the starting guy, which he really had never gotten the chance to do in his career. But then also to back him up with two different Canadians behind him. It's very interesting sometimes when you see all three guys that are that are on the depth chart for the same game, because you can only imagine what type of game plan that this team has when especially you're able to use all three of them as an example, like they did just this past week. So. It's a huge upgrade, so it's quite a bit of an upgrade in my opinion, but it's just a matter of being able to get the running game going, because it hasn't been, we're talking about things that haven't been perfect this year. The running game really has not been perfect, but it seems to be over the past couple of weeks, things that seem to be changing a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'd say that the Alouettes this year have definitely relied on that passing game in terms of really forcing that ball upfield. And I find it interesting kind of talking about the offensive line here, just because if I remember last year, like Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, you were keeping tallies on kind of who is having the most sacks, and I'm pretty sure Alouettes were pretty high up there on kind of sacks that they had given up last year with what was a similar squad. Am I right about that, Rick? Or
I'm pretty sure it was like the three teams. There was Crum in Ottawa.
Yep.
And then Fajardo was starting to get up there. And then kind of like slowly Saskatchewan was making their way.
Well, because Saskatchewan had given a lot up when Fajardo was there. But it's really, really important for a quarterback like Fajardo, who at least from what I've seen, is a bit more of a pocket quarterback as opposed to some other quarterbacks in this league who have really been able to do kind of have their strengths a lot in the scramble game. And so I think I was a little bit surprised this year when I saw 3 Down Nation put out an article kind of looking at the offensive lines, put Montreal actually at number 1 on that. And I was kind of like, okay, well, I see some pieces here. Not sure how much I'm buying this. I see the season, I'm like, no, I'm buying this. It's been one of those things where, because I mean, I'm from Winnipeg, I'm a Bomber fan, Rick's from Hamilton. I've seen kind of my offensive line kind of dwindle down from where it has been, and so it's one of those things where it's one of those things where the offensive line in Montreal, it's been so easy to not notice it. And if you don't notice the line, it's because they're doing their job. It's because you're not noticing those sacks constantly. And I think this group overall has been able to mesh very well. We had Coach Phil on for our video on Saskatchewan. That was the thing that he was saying was the most important, in the sense of that you can have 3 or 4 completely star offensive linemen, but you're only going to be as strong as you can play together. So if you're going to have a weak link, they're just going to keep beating you there. And I think the Alouettes have done a great job at really kind of having them work as a unit. And that's made all the difference for no matter what quarterback is being behind them.
The biggest thing you'll notice, though, is the fact that Cody Fajardo, he makes his reads and he's got the time and the space to react. And if he doesn't like what he sees, he just tucks the ball under his arm and goes for a run. And he's able to do that with no problem. And at the same time, yes, Alouettes fans are kind of holding their breath just a little bit, like, oh God, don't get hurt. But I mean, he'll go for like a 10, 12-yard scamper, and thankfully has the wherewithal to slide and get the first down. But at the same time, you're not able to do that unless your offensive line is giving you the opportunity to do that, to create even just a little bit of a lane for you. If you can't find your receiver, and you can't hand up, and if your running back is too busy pass blocking, then this opens up the opportunity for even though Fajardo's not considered a mobile quarterback per se, this year he's been very, very mobile. So I mean, he's had the opportunity to be able to do some stuff that we haven't seen from him, going back to his time in Saskatchewan or even Toronto.
Yeah, you look at the games that we've been through so far this year. I know we've only been through 9 games this year, but I think if I remember correctly, this time last year, I think the Alouettes had already given up 30 sacks. I know they're well above and beyond any team that was in the CFL when it came to giving up sacks. So obviously the O line has improved drastic. Actually, I think sacks in themselves are down in the CFL this year, but it's nice to see what Cody's able to do. Just to have second year under his belt, and as Cliff was saying, if you happen to see Cody leading the team in rushing one week, just when maybe the running backs are a little bit off, don't be surprised, because we've seen Cody, as Cliff said, just take off.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that's really, really important for when a quarterback is stuck is in that pocket and they're not seeing anything and they're going to decide to run is having those outside offensive tackles, being able to prevent those defensive ends from getting proper contain and allowing them to properly peel out, whether they're going outside or maybe they're going to rush inside if that is available. Having those offensive linemen being able to keep those guys in front of them is really important. Just because I remember, like, even just kind of growing up, I had played offensive line, and the key thing they tell you is you've got the guy in front of you, you're fine. The second you start going like this or like this, that's when you're going to get called on a hold. And so it's really, really important for that offensive line to be able to keep those guys in front of them. And so that way they're able to allow Fajardo to get out when need be without taking an unnecessary penalty and basically negating whatever Cody's able to get. So I think that's been really, really important for the Alouettes.
Yeah, I think I can count on one hand maybe the times I've heard holding by the offensive line or false start or anything like that. Like, it just, these are things that just don't really happen very often when it comes to this offensive line. It really does feel like they are completely in sync. They understand the assignment, as they say, and whatever it takes to keep Fajardo, Alexander, whoever the quarterback is for the Alouettes at the time, make sure that they're mobile, make sure they get to see their reads, make sure they get to hand off the ball if necessary, whatever it takes to make the play happen. That's what these guys do. I mean, they're big, they're athletic, they're smart. A lot of them are Canadian as well. So I mean, like, who doesn't love a good old Canadian offensive lineman? I mean, that to me that just makes, that's part of what makes this Alouettes team so special, is that they're able to diversify the offensive line and just have some absolute studs, giving Cody the protection that he needs.
And it hasn't been perfect at all, has it, Cliff? Because I mean, I remember we were talking a couple of weeks into the season, we have one of the new guys that we were dealing with. Joshua Donovan really was having a hard time. That we seemed to notice that he was having a hard time really dealing with some of the guys coming, some of the D line coming off the end, and Cody was at risk quite a bit. But over the last couple, I think the last at least 5 games, he has improved quite a bit. And as we were talking about before, Cody's staying upright, so he has learned. He's whatever it is that he did to improve, I can't complain.
Well, absolutely, and that sort of stuff gets solved. Like, those kinds of issues is stuff that gets solved in that film room, and so I think that goes to a big attest as well. With the Alouettes and their coaching staff being able to, whenever those issues do arise, being able to kind of tackle those and get those solved and keep the season moving, rather than with, sometimes you'll see with some players where they have a season where there's an issue that just haunts them that entire season, and it's only in the off season where they're really able to figure that out. Being able to get those done while the season is going on and keep moving forward, I think, is really, really important. Now, the other kind of aspect here of the offense here has been the receiving core for the Alouettes, and I think they've done an excellent job so far. I mean, this is a team that they have been throwing the ball in order to really move that ball downfield. So, what would your assessment be for the receiving core for the Alouettes?
Well, I mean, we have just been blessed with having a plethora of guys who have been able to step up, whether they've been on the starting roster, whether they have just come in through free agency, or whether they've been guys who've been waiting their turn on the practice roster. Just this year, because of all the, one of the few bad things for the Alouettes this season, it seems to be, is how many guys are ending up on the 6-game injured list. But a lot of these guys have been able to step up as the term is being used by the team. All these players are coming out of the hangar, and they're coming onto the field and being able to make a huge impact in the games themselves. So it depends on who we want to talk about, because obviously we've since we were taping this now, we're still waiting on to find out what's happening with Tyson Philpott and his injury this past weekend. But still, as you said, we hear the news about Austin Mack getting released by the Atlanta Falcons. It's possible that he may be coming back, considering what the rumors were and what he was going to be offered originally to stay with the Alouettes. But you have a lot of guys who've just stepped up, and it's really cool to see. Whether it be, as I said, God, I think we recently, hey, Cliff, I think we could say Nate Bahar has been one of the ones. He's only been here for 2 weeks, though, Cliff, right? But he's actually shown out that he actually can step up when necessary. But there are others, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right away you go right away to Charleston Rambo, who has just been an absolute monster. He was a monster in training camp, very very solid in the preseason, and one of those guys that was going to be given the opportunity just needed needed to open up. And when Tyler Snead went down to injury, ended up on the 6 game list after his week 1 injury against Winnipeg.
Yeah.
In comes Charleston Rambo, and it took him a little while to get going a bit. I guess it's one thing. Everybody looks good in training camp. Everybody looks good in the preseason and all that because you're kind of going at half speed. But when the lights are really bright and it's showtime, the cameras are on, and it's time to go. Not everybody's able to get off right away when it comes to understanding the playbook and developing that chemistry with your quarterback and the other receivers. But it took a little while for Charleston to get going, but these past few games too, he has just been an absolute beast. And we also just saw with Philpott going down to injury, Shedler Furvius, a draft pick for the Alouettes 2 years ago, 2 years ago. He was this is his second season. Sorry, last Saturday had an absolutely outstanding run and damn near scored a touchdown in the process. I mean, this is a young man too that has shown flashes of brilliance also in training camp and in preseason, and it was just a matter of waiting for the right opportunity to come along. Now, when you've got a Tyson Philpott and a Keon Julian Grant at one point being among the league leaders in receiving for the Canadian Football League, as a young national, you're kind of waiting. You don't wish injury upon anybody, but sometimes you feel like maybe that's the only way you're going to get a chance. That's the thing. You got to be patient. You got to wait for your number to get called. But when Julian Grant got hurt, Tyson Philpott now get banged up. Okay, This is your opportunity now. Make the most of it. Nate Bahar, also another national receiver, comes in and I like to think of him as like a grizzled young veteran in the sense that he's not an old man, but he's definitely played in this league for a number of years now, and he's able to impart a lot of that wisdom on a Shedler Furvius and some of the other youngsters or people that are in their first year here in the Canadian Football League, and just a smart route runner. He gets it. And he's one of those guys that can get open in a hurry. And as far as I'm concerned, he still has a lot of the pep in his step to the point where I'm going, why did Ottawa let this guy go? I mean, no offense to the Red Blacks and their receiving core, but they could have used it at Nate Bahar. But okay, if you don't want him, then the Alouettes will absolutely put his services to work. I mean, by and large, this receiving core has done some outstanding work. They've made some incredible plays. And it's just simply a matter of getting that connection with Cody or Davis Alexander, because he's made some guys look absolutely amazing as well. I mean, this receiving core, by and large, I don't want to say they're missing Austin Mack or not missing Austin Mack. If Austin Mack were to come back tomorrow, it would be amazing. It would just be making a good thing even better as far as I'm concerned. But as it stands right now, this receiving core has definitely answered the call every single time and has looked phenomenal in the process.
Absolutely.
If you look at last year's team and receivers and this year's, Philpott is almost in that Austin Mack where he was leading the team in receiving yards and everything. Charleston Rambo's what last year's Tyson Philpott was. Now that Mack's gone, Philpott's moved into that number 1 receiver, and then with Julian Grant kind of on the 6th game, now you have, like you said, Rambo moving into that number 2. The one receiver that I'm going to give a big shout out for is Reggie White Jr. This guy did not play injured. He was injured for 2 years. And in 6 games, this guy has 16 receptions, 240 yards, and is tied for second for touchdowns.
God, that is so hard to do. Being out of it for that long and being able to not only be able to just come back in general, but then being able to make an impact, I think is such a. Well, I'll put it this way: it was one of those things where I don't know if I was watching that game he came. I don't think I was. As I was not available, but I turn on my phone and I just see Reggie White Jr. all over TSN, and so it's all these wonderful catches he's making. I'm like, wasn't this guy gone for multiple years? Where did this happen? And it just, I think that's props to him for being able to do that, because that's got to be hard.
I think it
Yeah,
also shows that the Alouettes have faith in this guy, because you
Yeah.
usually think that if somebody is really hurt for a long period of time, sometimes the team will actually give up on a particular player, but not in this case. Danny Mac knows exactly what he wants when it comes to a wide receiver. He does have that veteran presence, because if you think about it, he is one of the. It's strange to say, he is one of the veteran wide receivers, and who have been with the team for the longest period of time. But I mean, it's. He's just, just so happy to be able to see him finally get the chance and still get that chance with the Alouettes, and he's making the most of it.
That's the culture you have to have with your team, and I think that's when you can really get the most out of your players, is when you're able to establish that healthy culture when guys are given that a chance, they really feel like that team is believing in them, and that team is really giving them that platform where it's like, we are. This is your chance. This is now something that you can do with it. And when the player really feels like they're in control of their own destiny in that regard, I think that's when you're a lot of times going to be able to get the most out of them. Now, one thing you did mention earlier, Tim, and I'm just curious about this because I'm assuming you guys will probably have a bit more knowledge about this than myself. When it comes to the cap situation in Montreal and now the speculation about Austin Mack after he gets released. Do the Alouettes have the cap for Austin Mack? I'm curious. I genuinely don't know.
I don't know the particulars exactly. Like, I couldn't give you an exact dollar amount of what kind of cap space the Alouettes have. I mean, especially too with guys on the 6 game. Obviously, their salary doesn't count against the cap while they're on the 6 game.
That complicates things.
It kind of muddies the waters just a little bit, because it would be one thing to say, okay, we're going to go get Austin Mack, and we don't care how much it costs, we're going to bring him back. And it may depend, like, now that he's had a taste of the NFL life, and maybe not quite NFL salary per se, but I mean, he got a really nice bonus to sign with the Atlanta Falcons. And is that enough for him? Maybe for this year, but if he's thinking about, maybe taking another crack at it, if he does come back to Canada and decides in 2-3 years, oh, maybe I want to take another crack at the NFL while I'm still young. I mean, he's still very much a young man and has the opportunity. Personally, I think he's going to exhaust all NFL options before coming back here. But let's say, God forbid, let's say he does come back, decides tomorrow, you know what, the hell with it. I want to go back to Montreal. I want to go back and
just sign him 1 year. Be like, you know what, we're looking to bring it back. Come back. Let's get it done.
Or a prorated deal or something along those lines. Like, let me come back and show that I can still ball out. Let me show, these NFL people what they're missing out on again, because that's what it was. He had a cup of coffee in the NFL. It didn't work out. Came to Canada with the right attitude, set the world on fire, and got the opportunity again. And now, I still think he's going to do everything he can to stay in the NFL. Like, I'm sure somebody
will take the Nathan Rourke route in that sense. Yeah.
In that sense, I definitely see him doing something like that. But if he decides he wants to come back to Montreal, I won't say necessarily take a hometown discount, but again, I have to believe that Danny Machocha has kind of earmarked a certain amount with the hopes that maybe he does come back, because, again, had the NFL not come calling, he would have been back again, but on a rookie deal. But I have to believe that they would have maybe adjusted a little bit to keep his services here in Montreal. So,
of course,
it was more than just adjust, Cliff. There were rumors of him being offered $250K.
Yeah,
this is true. Well, again, and all this to say that I think Danny Mac has that sort of idea in mind that, okay, if I want Austin Mack back in the lineup for the Alouettes, it's going to cost some money. Yeah. Can I make that work? And I have to believe he's got a scenario in mind where he can make that work. And
if he can do it for Sean Lemon and Darnell Sankey, bringing them in mid-season and figuring out the cap that way,
that's true.
I think I'm very sure that he would be able to do it with Austin Mack.
Well, what helps was that he didn't have to overpay Trevor Harris and Eugene Lewis. Those guys bounced in the offseason, so I mean, all that money got freed up. So
but that kind of brings it back to what you were saying before about how, for the fans, it's like the wonders that winning can do. That can also sometimes also apply to the players, in the sense of whether that's players being like, you know what, let's run it back again, cheap discount. Like, I even remember, because I live in Winnipeg, I'm a Bomber fan by nature. I even remember after we had won our Grey Cup in 2019, we go into the 21 season, and there were guys all over the roster on pay cuts just because they wanted to stay and they wanted to run it back. They obviously do. And then they try to do it again, not able to get it done in 2022 and 2023. But it just shows that how a winning culture can affect it that way. Now, eventually, there comes a point where then they want that big payday, because naturally that's what players are looking for. But it's one of those things where when I think you're in the position like the Alouettes, where you're leading the league, and you're in a position where it really looks promising, like you can run it back. I wouldn't put it past me to say that it'd be impossible to bring him back.
Definitely not. I think there's mutual admiration for both. I know the Alouettes and their brass, the players, everybody loves Austin Mack, and I think it's vice versa as well. Every time I've ever spoken to him about the culture in Montreal and what his experience was like playing for the Alouettes, nothing but love. So I could definitely see the two sides getting a deal done. I don't think it wouldn't necessarily come down to money. It would have to be one of those sort of you know unspoken agreements kind of thing. Like, okay, I'm going to come, maybe give you a bit of a hand. As I said, coming in on a prorated contract, so you're not paying beaucoup dollars. But when when next season rolls around, if there's no NFL interest, I'll stay put. But you got to open up the checkbook a little bit.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that me and Carter were talking about the other day, and I'm just going to go back to the whole injury thing. Carter, do you remember how I was telling you that Winnipeg and Toronto both had 13 and 14 players on the 6 game? Montreal has 12.
Yeah, so they got a lot of guys.
We locked out, the Ticats locked out because we only have 8, but that's almost like a full roster between starting lineup between those 3 teams of just players on 6 games.
Yeah, and it's at one point, even last year, at one point they had 16 players.
Yeah,
and it was like a who's who of the Canadian Football League. Like, but again, this is where the rookies, the guys, the practice roster guys, this is their opportunity to shine, and that's exactly what it was. The KB Nentos, the Reggie Stubblefields, they came in. You didn't know them from a hole in the wall. I guarantee, even the most hardcore Alouettes fans, like, who the hell are those guys? But they came in, they understood the assignment. They took their lumps in the process, of course, but they rounded into form at the best possible time, and those 2 names alone were key elements to the Alouettes winning the Grey Cup. So, I mean, anybody who's on the practice roster now, simply put, you really got to make sure you're ready to go, because when your number is called, you've got one chance to make it work, and everybody's going to be watching because they want to see who's going to be the next KB Nento, the next Austin Mass, the next Reggie Stubblefield. Like, who's going to be the next guy that comes out of nowhere and becomes a superstar for the Alouettes and ultimately the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pieces definitely that I think can really be a lethal force here on this offense. But going to kind of now towards the defense thing, what would your assessment be if we're looking at this defense? We're looking at, say, like the front house, with your defensive line and your linebackers. What has been kind of your assessment of them so far for the Alouettes?
Absolutely nasty. They've just been incredible. This Noel Thorpe defense has been nothing short of phenomenal. I mean, you talk about the chess master. That's exactly who he is. Whatever pieces you give him to work with, he'll make it happen. And he will put together a defense that just gets in your face. It's blitz heavy. They keep pounding. They keep coming after you. They keep trying to get in your grill. And you love to see it. I mean, what this defensive line has been able to do has been nothing short of outstanding over the past 2 years. And it's something that Danny Machocha has been working on pretty much from the moment he got to Montreal in 2020. That was one thing that he said he wanted to work on and improve upon constantly, is the defensive line. And I even asked him earlier this year, I mean, you just won the Grey Cup and you're still tinkering with are you just never happy with it? And he laughed. He said, no, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. I want to keep getting better. And like, to me, I won't say it's perfection. I'm like, well, how do you prove upon what's almost perfection? But that's exactly what he does. I mean, this year alone, he brought in Isaac Adeyemi Berglund and Derek Wigan from the Stampeders, and those 2 have just been absolute beasts. I mean, lining up with Sean Lemon before his suspension kicked in, and Mustafa Johnson, who has just been an absolute terror. I mean, like, this guy just barrels through offensive lines and gets in people's faces. I mean, it's just an absolute monster. Avery Ellis has come alive in the past couple of weeks and has been an absolute force as a rush end. And then you talk about the linebacking core, Tyrese Beverett. I mean, this guy arguably can make a case to be the most outstanding defensive player, if not in the entire CFL, then at least in the Eastern Division. He'd be the Eastern Division nominee by a long shot. Jeffrey Cantin-Arcu, first round draft pick for the Alouettes this year. He's come into form very nicely, and he's been very fortunate to be surrounded by a Darnell Sankey and a Tyrese Beverett, kind of anchoring those guys.
Yeah.
And my goodness, I mean, this young man has really come alive, and Darnell Sankey has been a great teacher, and he too, just terrorizing. In fact, I actually saw him after the game this past Saturday, congratulating him, like, "Hey, great job, way to go!" And he goes in for the bro hug, and he just hits my shoulder. I'm like, "Oh boy!" Like, just. And Tim's looking at me like, "Are you okay?" Like, "I think he separated my shoulder." And that's him being friendly to me. Like,
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it's like to take a hit from this guy. Like, thank God
when
you're
he's
wearing
not
pads,
feeling
'cause-
like being so friendly.
Listen, I do not want to get on his bad side. I mean, he's a sweetheart of a guy, but oh my God, you do not want that smoke. If he's coming for you, you better
Just
run
a
the other way.
monster of a human being.
And this is too, Cliff, with despite the Owls losing, a guy like Loa Uglak. I mean, they were able to basically retool because Loa was a rookie himself coming in and came into his own, even if though he joined the Alouettes late. And again, as I said, Danny Mac being Danny Mac.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He's just constantly tinkering with the defensive line, the linebackers he has at his disposal as well. I mean, let's not forget the secondary. I mean, this secondary too has just been absolutely treacherous as well for opposing offenses. I mean, like, talk about guys like Marc-Antoine Dequoy, obviously. I mean, he has definitely been an absolute force, and coming off that most outstanding Canadian nomination for the East, I mean, he just picked up where he left off, and he, like, the speed on this guy and his spatial awareness is second to none. And then you've got Wesley Sutton, Najee Murray, Ento, obviously, Reggie Stubblefield before he went down to injury. I mean, that was definitely unfortunate. But then Bryce Cosby's come in and has done an outstanding job in replacing Reggie. I mean, you can't really replace Reggie Stubblefield so easily, but Bryce Cosby's come
sliding into
again,
that spot. Yeah.
Yep, out of nowhere and doing a phenomenal job. I mean, this team, simply put, this defense just knows how to slam the door at any given moment. In fact, I think back to like the games against Toronto and even against this past Saturday against Hamilton. Like, it almost feels like when they take the rest of the night off because they've already established their dominance, and that's when these teams get like these garbage time touchdowns. It's almost insulting because I know it affects their stats, and I know Noel Thorpe also too has to be livid at the thought of having to give up a touchdown, even if it's like with garbage time tutty, 1 minute left in the game. You're still giving up points like that. I know that's got to be eating at him, but that's just the culture that he's set with his team. And I mean, with the pieces he has in place, he's been able to do some really, really outstanding work.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, just a question on defense. Former Ticat Dylan Wynn, his numbers are way down this year. Is he just not getting, like, obviously I know he's a backup, but he's just not getting playing time? Because I mean, he only has 7 sacks in seven games, so it's almost like, or sorry, 7 defensive tackles in 7 games. So it's almost like one defensive tackle per game. And he was getting, more tackles with us when he was with us. Is he just like a backup? Like, is he going in every once in a while? What are you guys seeing over on that end?
For the most part, he's pretty rotational. I mean, again, when I talked about the guys I've talked about earlier, like Wigan, Berglund, not Sankey, Johnson. I mean, that's the thing. You got 4 absolutely outstanding players there, and yeah, you got to spell them a little bit. You got to switch things up a little bit and give different looks. But I've got to say, I'm a little surprised Dylan Wynn had it. I don't want to say he's not fitting in, because he's definitely playing, I think, some very solid football, but it's not the same football he was playing in Hamilton. And I don't know if it's just a matter of the system just being that much different from what he's used to in Hamilton, or if it's just because these other guys are just so dominant that he just kind of is on the outside looking in a bit. I really couldn't answer that for you, but I mean, I'm a little surprised that we're not speaking his name a little bit more often. I mean, I think that just speaks to just how important that defensive line is. That the guys that I mentioned earlier, like, those are your key pieces. Whereas Dylan Wynn is somebody that you can bring him in at a moment's notice, and he should slot in no problem. He should still be able to carry the mail, so to speak. And by and large, I'd say he's done that. But yeah, I have to admit, I was expecting to hear his name a little bit more this season, and for whatever reason, we're simply not.
Yeah, like I mean, there was two kind of comments I actually had based on some of the we had kind of touched on a little bit earlier. One of them was kind of in that conversation we were talking about with Darnell Sankey, and I think one of the really key things, and this isn't even just with defense but with offense, is when you have a team that is a very healthy mixture of established veteran talent with young talent, both that is now kind of starting to flourish and guys that are still kind of working towards that. Having that mixture really allows that knowledge to properly be passed on and can keep that team alive and keep that team healthy. And I think the Alouettes have done a fantastic job with that. So there was that side of things, and kind of as a bit of a two-parter here. I mean, you were talking about that game against Hamilton, and where there was almost a portion where they're able to kind of sit back a little bit, and certain guys would be coming in and getting maybe reps that they wouldn't have been getting if this was, a 30-30 game, like real close nail biter. And I think that that's something that can also really keep a team really healthy. Is when if you have a team that's constantly just barely trying to stay into these games, they're going to be kind of playing their starters constantly. Those guys are going to be monopolizing field time. You're not going to have chances necessarily to put those backups in and give them the proper reps. But in the Alouettes' current position, they're able to do that. They've had many games where they've been able to establish strong leads and strong performance that, again, I'm sure Noah Thorpe does not like giving up that touchdown, but it's one of those things where if he's able to give some of those backups those reps that they need, even if they're not able to make a massive impact this year, when contracts go up in coming years and guys are looking for big pay raises, that's when sometimes those guys may possibly move on. Some of them, I'm sure, will stick around. But then that's when some of those guys will get that opportunity. And so I think that the Alouettes are set up very well for this season and possibly being able to pull a back-to-back. It's looking decently likely like that's going to happen, but I think they're also set up well for the future in the event that some of the talent decides to move on.
Well, a lot of the drafting that Danny Machoch has done, like these are guys that you don't know right away, but 2-3 years down the road, just like it was when he drafted Marc-Antoine Dequoy in 2021 or 2020, sorry. We're just wait and see what can this guy do. Pierre-Olivier Lesage was drafted in 21, went to Seattle, was there for a year and a half. The Alouettes had to wait for his services to become available. But he's all about playing the long game, and he's not afraid to take a chance on somebody. You may not see them now. They might be in the lineup, they might be on the practice roster, or they're biding their time elsewhere. But when the time comes and you need to reach back there and grab that guy, you'll be glad that you went ahead and drafted him. And that's just how he seems to be building his roster. Like what his draft classes are. They've been the past 2-3 have just been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there's been a few whiffs. There's been a couple of players that
everyone's going to have whiffs. Everyone's going to have whiffs. That's just the nature of the situation.
You're never going to get absolutely perfect, but he's had way more hits than misses, and you see it out there right now. A lot of the guys that were a part of that championship team also were drafted homegrown players, not just because they came from Montreal, but they were drafted by the Alouettes and developed properly. I mean, Tyson Philpott, another great example of that, drafted in the first round, and he too had to bide his time a little bit. But as I say, you can't hide talent, and he just was able to flourish right away. And before he got hurt, look at the conversations he was in. Leading among the league leaders and receivers, possible MOP
still haunts me from game one.
I mean,
him and Dequoy both do. I can still picture the pick right in the end zone, right when I thought Caleros was going to get it, and of course it would take him another 4 games or something to get that first touchdown pass. But it just shows that how well when you grow guys in the system and are not necessarily relying on signing everyone from these other systems, where you have to essentially make them kind of relearn the system, and now being able to play not just football but play Noel Thorpe's version of defense and Moss's game. With Jason Moss's game. And so I think it's a really big advantage to have a lot of grown talent that have been able to really cement themselves in the system. And I see here now, one thing I was kind of curious about, now that we've kind of done our overview of the team, is looking at maybe some of the players who have maybe exceeded expectations, and there might be almost no one. And maybe someone who maybe you're surprised who hasn't gotten as much, and that can be for a variety of reasons. Maybe that's from injury, maybe that's from just performance in general, maybe that's from playing time, whatever that is. Who would you say is kind of being on both sides of the ball in that sense?
So many players, eh, Cliff? I mean, that we could actually choose from. I mean, it's um, I'm gonna give one which we feel bad for, which we think that if he can shake his injury bug, I think he's going to be able to do great thing, and that's Tyrell Richard because he was such a high draft pick for the Alouettes a couple of years back. He just can't. It seems to be injury after injury for this guy. But again, as we are talking about, like a Reggie White, the team does seem to have faith in him. I know we were able to speak with him post game just this past week, and looks like he's about to be coming back, which is good because it's tough because the guy has shown a lot of promise, but it just injuries for whatever it is for some of these guys, they just can't shake them. And hopefully this will be his last major injury in his career, and he'll be able to flourish for the rest of his career, whether it be in Montreal, whether it be elsewhere. And I think finally, for me at least, I think agree with me on this one, is finally being able to see Davis Alexander do what he can do.
Yeah.
We remember seeing him over in Trois-Rivières for his very first training camp and seeing the arm on this guy.
Cool.
It was just phenomenal. I mean, we've heard during practice and and during pregame warmups, the guy's tossing 60-yard bombs, and yet we see what he was able to do this past weekend. When it came to the passes to Rambo specifically, but. It's just great to see him, finally get the chance to play. I know he's been stuck at number 3 for quite a while. Very unique situation, especially especially in his first year, and then obviously last year, with the whole, when Cody coming in, and then obviously going back and when it was VA and our other quarterbacks. But he's been biding his time at a number 3. Finally got up to a preseason number 2. Put back to number 3, but obviously with Caleb getting hurt, he's finally gotten his chance.
There you go.
Yeah, that is the one thing with Davis that just I can't help but smile because, as Tim said, we've watched this kid pretty much from day one, and we saw it. He had the tools right away. The zip he had on his passes was like nothing we've ever seen. And like, okay, there's just something about him. He had a great attitude, good work ethic. I mean, just checked off all the boxes. Like, this is who you want as a quarterback.
Yeah.
But, greener than grass. But, obviously it's going to take some time. He's got to learn how to be a quarterback in this league. He's got to go through the motions and that. And who better to have as your teacher in that regards than arguably the GOAT when it comes to CFL quarterbacks and Anthony Calvillo. And it's clear that he's learned those lessons. He's taken AC's teachings and made the most of every opportunity that he's gotten. It's been mostly in the preseason where you've seen him do things, but I mean, we were convinced. We saw right away, like, okay, this guy's got something special. And every year, and we've been clamoring for him to get his opportunity. And to the point where when Cody went down to injury, it's like, okay, now it's Davis' time to shine. But nope, Caleb Evans goes in. Like, okay. I mean, no disrespect to Caleb. I mean, he's absolutely fantastic when it comes to short yardage, but when it comes to actual quarterback play, I still haven't seen anything that makes me say 100% without question, yeah, that's the guy. And lo and behold, he ended up not winning the game against Toronto and was looking really shaky against Saskatchewan. But the minute Davis stepped in, we're like, okay, we were telling people around us at the personal stadium, okay, this is who we've been telling you about. Get ready. And sure, he did not disappoint in the least. Like, everything he did was just perfect. It was just great passes, great awareness. Pocket presence was there, and everybody just went into a different gear almost. Like, just flipped the switch, and it was not the same sad sack team that dominated the first half. I mean, this team just came alive with Alexander under center and displaying the leadership characteristics right away at such a young age. Like, he was born for this. Like, he was built for this. And I think that's really what it came down to, was he just needed to wait for that opportunity. And when he finally got it, he made the absolute most of it, and he's still making the most of it. I mean, yeah, you couldn't write a better success story in the Canadian Football League right now than Davis Alexander. And I mean, we'll be thrilled to see Cody Fajardo back in the lineup. Don't get it wrong. But I mean, until then, I mean, I almost want to say, Cody, just take your time, make sure you're good, because Davis is
There's
driving
no
the
need
car
to
right
rush it
now.
right now.
Exactly. Don't do anything stupid because I still think Fajardo has at least another good 5, 6, even 7 years left in him. But now Davis Alexander has proven that he can play football in this league and do a very good job of it. So, I mean, it's way too early to talk about quarterback controversy, but I mean, for the Alouettes to have a veritable 1-2 punch behind center with Fajardo and Alexander, I mean, that's just
it's been a while.
It has been a while.
What I would be interested to say is whoever does your guys' American scouting, I would just like to just sit there for one day to pick their mind. Because Carter, just think of this, okay?
Yeah.
Rambo played college for Oklahoma in 17 to 20.
Yep.
Went to Miami in 21. Undrafted in 22. Spent that year on Carolina Panthers practice squad. Went to the XFL for the Orlando Guardians. Spent that also year with the Philadelphia Eagles, comes to Montreal this year and is second in receiving yards.
Yeah, so you can't hide talent. That's the one thing I say over and over again. And if you've got the talent, this Alouettes team will find you. It's remarkable, just the scouting, the drafting. I mean, this front office, they know how to find talent. I mean, that's why some of the moves that some of the moves that they've made have been a little bit of a head scratcher, but it's to the point where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Oh, you're going to sign that guy? Okay, sure. And more often than not,
trust the process.
More hit. Exactly. Sometimes you really do have to trust the process, as cliched as that sounds. But as I said, Danny Machocha and his staff, way more hits than misses.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking over here. Now, one thing I'm curious about for the Alouettes is a bit of their situation moving forward. Obviously, they've won 8-1 to start the season. There's nothing to complain about with 8-1. You can't expect 9-0. 8-1 is crazy start to the season. And so Week 10, Alouettes get it done, 33-23 victory over the Ticats. And then for their next few weeks, their schedule will go as such. Friday, August 16th, the Alouettes play the Riders, and I don't know when we're uploading this, so I'll actually say, this is being recorded on the 12th of August. And so it is Alouettes at Saskatchewan on the 16th. Then the following week, they will be hosting the Elks on the 25th. And then the following week after that, they then go to the bye week. And then they come back and they play BC at home at the start of September. How do you feel about the Alouettes moving forward with that being kind of their current situation as far as schedule goes?
You look at, obviously, you really can't look ahead. I mean, obviously, with the teams coming in over the next couple of weeks, they are kind of different than how they were when we first played them. Obviously, it's going to be a different Saskatchewan team. It is going to be a very different Edmonton team, depending on who's behind center. And then BC with their current situation, who knows when it comes to VA, who's going to be under center for them. So it's, I think they just, again, after seeing, I think Coach Moss put it best in his, in the this week's post game message to the team that was just put out on social media. Yes, they've gone through the first half, but now the next 9 are the grind. Yeah. This is where you really need to step up and to make sure that you continue with what you've done and to prove that you weren't a fluke at 8-1. Yeah. So it'll be obviously there'll be tough games. I mean again, the team just has to continue with what they're doing, no matter who's under center.
And that's where they stepped up last season. And that's where they made all the difference. And I think it's very possible that they are able to continue that. What's kind of your 2 cents on that, Cliff?
To me, I think the big thing is going to be quarterback. I mean, as I said, you got nothing to worry about with Davis Alexander behind center, but you still have Cody Fajardo that could be coming back at a moment's notice. A lot of people are wondering if maybe he's going to make the comeback so he can play his revenge game, if you will, in Saskatchewan, facing Trevor Harris, the former Alouettes quarterback, who still has yet to face
a little bit of a
former team.
Swapperoo, yeah.
I jokingly referred to that as the Jilted Lovers Bowl because you had both quarterbacks essentially, not being traded for each other, but they both swap teams essentially,
one in, one out. Yeah.
And have had various degrees of success with their new squads. I mean, before Harris got hurt, I mean, he was doing pretty well, like not just this year but last year as well. Yeah. And Fajardo, well, we know exactly what he's been able to do. Do I think we're going to see that on Friday against the Rough Riders? Are we going to see Fajardo versus Harris? Maybe, but
A
personally,
lot of question marks.
if I'm the Alouettes, I'm not thinking about the marketability of this game. I don't care about that. Let the league worry about that. Quite frankly, I want the best possible player behind center. And if that's Davis Alexander, then I've got no worries whatsoever. If Fajardo thinks he can go, then I absolutely bring him in and let him do his thing. But I don't want to. I wouldn't want them to rush it just for the simple fact of having Fajardo versus Harris, in a grudge match or whatever. Whatever sort of thing that the CFL wants to cook up to generate hype for this game. I mean, it's not that. It can't be about that. You have to put your best foot forward, and I have no doubt in my mind that Coach Moss and the rest of the crew are going to evaluate, and if they're going to make the best decision possible for this team going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like right now, in terms of marketability, I mean, they're constantly winning. They don't need to worry about that. That's not a problem that they have. So,
as I say, winning fixes everything.
Yep.
The other thing that I was going to mention, I'm not sure which one of you mentioned it, about the whole can't go forward. Can we just take a look at all the upsets in this league this year? Unless you have to play to that final whistle, and even then some after last week's game. Because then you never know who's going to win, and you can't just stand back on everyone because, like Ottawa and Saskatchewan, they kept on coming back. No, was it Ottawa? I can't remember who it was this past week. But it's like they keep on coming back, and one person throws a touchdown, the other team throws a touchdown. So between now and the end of the season, there's going to be teams. Edmonton even can claw back into the West. It's just like
they're on a bit of a heater right now. So
anyone can beat anyone.
Yep. No, I mean, it's one of those things where me and Rick this year have done absolutely horrible on our pickups just because it's been so unpredictable this year.
I haven't done as bad as you have, my friend.
Yeah, no, I'm sub 500. I know that. It has been a great year for me. But overall, it's funny. We have an art question lined up, although I will say I'm pretty sure I know where this is going. What's your standing prediction for the Alouettes? Even though I'm almost positive I know exactly where you're putting them. So
yeah. Cliff and I rarely do this. We rarely do this. We let them play. To be honest, last year we finally said it at the beginning of at the end of the year. We expected the Owls to go 9-9. Both of us said it, and neither of us had talked to each other. I know it's a cop out, but I'm letting the team play through. Because we've seen in Owls history, we've seen teams start the season like they have now and then go on a major losing streak. So we'd rather just obviously, that was 10 plus years ago with Rod Rust, when they had a giant losing streak. But for me, I'm just going to let them continue with what they're doing.
Fair enough.
Our hope is obviously for them to finish first in the East and to be able to host the Eastern Final.
There you go.
Yes. The one thing I'm going to say though is right now they're 8-1. In theory, they could go 17-1. Either go 17-1 or go 15-3. Do not go 16-2.
Yes.
It doesn't bode well. If we learn nothing else from the 2023 Toronto Argonauts, don't go 16-2. Also, don't let your quarterback get into a scandal with your employees, but that's a topic for another day, I guess.
My job.
So 17-1, 15-3. I'm good either way.
Yeah,
not 16-2.
Don't want to be in the same group as Edmonton and Toronto. No.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll go even so far as to say, if for some reason, and again, I think the game out in BC, for example, is practically a guaranteed loss for the Alouettes. If you lose that game, so be it. And if you do, and you end up with a couple of games left, find a game to throw. I don't care which one it is. Just flat out lose. Be 15-3. Don't go 16-2. That's the only thing I have to say is, for the love of God, do not go 16-2.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really, really curious to see exactly where the Alouettes are able to finish. Although I'm not going to lie, I'd be shocked if they fell out of first in the East, as it looks like there's going to be kind of a battle for that second and three spot right now. But I don't see them dropping out of one unless something drastic happens. But then again, this is the CFL. We're a league where anything can happen at any given moment, and so
it usually does.
No
And
lead
it
is a
usually
safe
does.
lead.
No lead is a safe lead. That is right. So overall, if we had to give probably a letter grade for the Alouettes, I mean, A plus, like, it's like A plus, like up until
I'll
this
give them
point.
a B plus because
Oh,
there's always room for improvement.
there you go.
Jeez. You're tough. I was gonna say a solid A. I mean, I can't go A plus simply because they did have that one loss against Toronto. Again,
Fair
due
enough.
to extenuating circumstances, it wasn't completely their fault. But again, you can't blame injuries. You can't blame some of the outside factors. I mean, wins and losses happen. But I would say overall with this team, just from how they're built to what you see on the field and everything in between, as far as I'm concerned, this team is a solid A all day long.
And
Actually,
if they end up at 16-2, Cliff's giving them an F.
A D minus.
well, depends on what happens. By the way, the command center just stepped in. They've overruled me, and they've given the Alouettes an A. Okay,
There you go.
so
there you go. All right, so I think that's pretty much all we got. So I appreciate you guys being able to come out. Make sure you guys definitely check out Alouettes Flight Deck. What all platforms are you guys on for your guys'
You
show?
name it, we're on it. I mean, as far as the actual podcast platforms go, any of the major ones, just search for Alouettes Flight Deck, and more often than not, you'll find us there.
Perfect.
All else fails, go to www.alouettesflightdeck.ca. We are also on YouTube, where we also do our post-game show, Flight Deck Live. So make sure you go to youtube.com/Alouettes Flight Deck. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following us on
Perfect.
X. We're on Facebook, Instagram. Pretty much search for Alouettes Flight Deck, and you'll find us.
Twitch.
Oh yeah, we are also now on Twitch. We don't play video games. I'm just letting you know, but we are on Twitch. So
there you go. Well, I'll have links to a lot of those in the description below. So anyone who's watching this, you guys will be able to check down there. Make sure you guys check out their show. They got lots of good stuff there, especially if you're an Alouettes fan. So I think without further ado, that's all we got. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like, share maybe around, subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the little notification bell. Helps out a ton. Again, thanks to you guys for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And we might have to have you guys on again sometime. So you guys,
you know where to find us.
Everyone have a wonderful rest of their day and take care.